They say the most dangerous place isn't a dark alley at midnight. It's your own living room. Welcome to Murderize. Today we are peeling back the layers of Louisiana's hidden darkness. We aren't just talking about random street crime. We are tracking 10 individuals who wore the ultimate mask of sanity before revealing exactly who they really were. Case number 1 is that of Beoria Abraham Simmons II, bachelor's degree in social work from Louisville's Spalding College, employed as a counselor at a halfway house for parolees, upstanding citizen by all accounts. The kind of man whose supervisor trusted him so completely that he set Beoria up on a date with his own sister-in-law. That's reputation. That's a mask so convincing even the people who should have known better bought the performance entirely. Before we get deeper, I'm curious to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments section. They'll be there to read all of them. Let's go. Between May 1981 and March 1983, 3 women and girls vanished from Louisville, Kentucky streets and ended up in wooded areas with bullets in their bodies. 15-year-old Robin Barnes, a middle school cheerleader. 29-year-old Shannon House. 39-year-old Nancy Bettman. Each picked up by a heavy-set black man driving a lime green Chevrolet Camaro. Each driven to secluded spots near Iroquois Park. Each raped, shot with a .360 caliber pistol, and discarded. Here's what gets me. While detectives interviewed 75 people connected to Robin Barnes, while they built psychological profiles and reached out to police departments nationwide, Beoria Simmons was counseling parolees. He was helping men reintegrate into society. He was being helpful. His entire profession was built on understanding human vulnerability, on knowing exactly what people need to hear when they're at their lowest. Robin Barnes was just 15. Her body was found by a fisherman, fully clothed except for the evidence that couldn't be hidden. A single pubic hair on her coat, 3 bullet casings beneath her, a broken left wrist where she tried desperately to escape that car. Shannon House was discovered 10 months later by a roofer near Iroquois Park. Police initially didn't connect her murder to Barnes until they found the bullet casing. Same .360 caliber pistol. Same predator. When Nancy Bettman's body was found by 3 boys in a creek in March 1983, investigators finally saw the pattern. Once a year. Same location. Same weapon. But when your suspect is a college-educated social worker who counsels criminals for a living, when he's the guy everyone respects, the system isn't looking at him. They arrested the wrong man entirely. Paul Davis Thomas, convicted by an all-white jury of attempted kidnapping after a witness identified him from photos. He got 3 years. 5 months later, when Simmons was arrested, the prosecutor was overwhelmed because he knew they'd gotten it wrong. They'd locked up an innocent man while Beoria Simmons kept hunting. What finally stopped him was a 16-year-old girl with a pocket knife. June 11, 1983. Simmons kidnapped her at gunpoint, drove her to Iroquois Park, ordered her out of the car. She stabbed him and ran. Found shelter in a convenience store. Meanwhile, at Humana Hospital, Beoria Abraham Simmons too showed up with a knife wound claiming he'd been robbed by 3 hitchhikers. During interrogation, Simmons confessed to all 3 murders. His defense compared him to Ted Bundy, arguing he shouldn't be executed but studied. He was initially sentenced to death, 6 death sentences. But in 2010, after 25 years on death row, a federal judge allowed him to challenge his jury selection. Rather than continue litigation, prosecutors made a deal. 6 life sentences without parole at Kentucky State Penitentiary. Here's what haunts me about Beoria Simmons. The system that was supposed to stop him empowered him. He had training specifically designed to help people in crisis, to understand trauma, to build trust. He worked surrounded by vulnerable men who needed guidance. And he used all of it to hunt and destroy women who crossed his path. That 16-year-old girl who fought back, she's the only reason he stopped. Not the system, not the training. A teenager with a pocket knife. Beoria Simmons is still alive. Still in that single cell. Still the man no one saw coming until 3 women were dead and a 4th had to stab her way to survival. That's the cost of believing the mask. That's what happens when we forget that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like the person who's supposed to help. Case number 2 is that of Keyshawn Stewart, 25 years old, who walked onto Interstate 264 near Dixie Highway just before 2:30 in the morning on November 19, 2021, and opened fire. His first target was 37-year-old Freddie O'Bannon, a construction worker and father of 5 sitting in his work truck during an overnight shift with Louisville Paving and Construction. Stewart shot him dead at the scene. Then he walked over to an unmarked police cruiser where off-duty Sergeant Chris Lane was helping with traffic control, pointed his gun through the window, and shot Lane in the face. Think about that for a second. Stewart didn't run after killing O'Bannon. He walked, deliberately, purposefully, toward a police officer and pulled the trigger. Lane testified he'd seen Stewart about 30 minutes earlier walking in a grassy area near the Watterson Expressway, but didn't think anything of it. Nobody should have been out there at 2:30 in the morning, but Stewart wasn't doing anything suspicious. Just walking. Just waiting. Lane was sitting in his car watching Netflix with the windows cracked a few inches when he heard a male voice. Startled, he turned to see a gun pointed at him and ducked as fast as he could while throwing the car into reverse. That's when Stewart fired. Here's the thing about Sergeant Lane. Despite being shot in the face, despite the shock and pain and blood, he pursued Stewart in his vehicle, got out, returned fire, and shot him twice. Then he got him into custody. Body camera footage from the first responding officers was played for the jury, parts too graphic to show publicly, showing O'Bannon shot in his truck and Lane critically wounded but still fighting. That's survival instinct meeting training. That's refusing to let the predator walk away. Stewart's defense didn't deny he did it. They asked the jury to decide whether he intentionally committed those crimes. His grandmother testified that he'd struggled with mental illness for years and worried he wouldn't receive adequate care in prison. The jury found Stewart guilty but mentally ill on all charges: murder, attempted first-degree assault of a police officer, wanton endangerment, fleeing police, and possession of a handgun as a convicted felon. They recommended 2 consecutive life sentences. The judge agreed. In victim impact statements, O'Bannon's daughter Jania spoke directly to Stewart. "You changed 3 people's families' lives that night. Do you realize that? Your life ended that night. My dad's life ended that night. You almost ended the life of a police officer. Everybody has children. You don't have any. You ruined your life as well." Stewart remained expressionless throughout. O'Bannon's mother Anita said she had to forgive him because she refused to walk around with hatred in her heart, but made it clear Stewart absolutely should be in the penitentiary for the rest of his life for the sake of the community and to ensure this never happens to anyone else. Here's what haunts me about this case. It was random. O'Bannon wasn't targeted because of who he was. He was targeted because he was there, sitting in a truck, doing his job, keeping his co-workers and the motoring public safe in a construction zone at 2:30 in the morning. A father of 5 who'd worked for Louisville Paving since April 2020. A man his company described as highly respected and committed. And Stewart walked onto that highway, saw him, and decided that was enough. Then he saw a police officer and decided that wasn't enough. The randomness is what makes it terrifying. The fact that there's no motive, no connection, no reason except that Stewart was mentally ill and armed and standing on Interstate 264 looking for targets. Sergeant Lane told reporters he forgave Stewart, but emphasized he should be in prison for life. O'Bannon's mother embraced Stewart's family outside the courtroom, his grandmother and mother, because forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about refusing to carry hatred. But forgiveness doesn't erase the fact that Frederick O'Bannon is dead, that his children lost their father, that a construction zone became a crime scene, that mental illness, left untreated and combined with access to firearms, turned an interstate into an execution ground. Stewart is serving 2 consecutive life sentences. O'Bannon is still dead. Lane still carries the scars. And somewhere out there, construction workers still show up for overnight shifts on highways, hoping the random doesn't find them. Case number 3 is that of Darnell Super Chef Ferguson, Food Network star, host of Super Chef Grudge Match, frequent judge on Chopped and Guy's Grocery Games, Louisville native, former restaurant owner, Philadelphia-born chef who told the Tuscaloosa News he was inspired to become a chef after discovering Emeril Lagasse's Emeril Live in high school. The man who cooked for Team USA at the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. The man who opened Super Chefs on Bardstown Road and the Drip Pin Crab before closing both. The man who told the world he'd been arrested 6 times for selling drugs, that the last time in jail he realized he'd become everything they told you not to become in elementary school, and vowed to focus on cooking and never return. The man whose TV show's second season began airing in late December 2023. The man who, on January 2nd, 2024, allegedly entered his estranged wife's home without permission and strangled her until she lost consciousness. According to court records and detective testimony, Ferguson called his estranged wife several times that night because he needed to drop the kids off due to a family emergency. When she didn't answer, he went to her home. There was no sign of forced entry, but a window was open. Once inside, Ferguson allegedly began yelling at her and punching walls, causing damage to her home. Then, according to the arrest affidavit and testimony from St. Matthew's Detective Mark Richardson, Ferguson put both hands around her throat and started to strangle her. The woman told authorities she couldn't breathe and lost consciousness. When she regained consciousness, she was on the floor. Ferguson allegedly told her that if she told anyone what happened, he'd take his own life. Before leaving, he reportedly stole her credit card, debit card, and identification. The victim was left with redness, scratches, and pain to her neck, and a scratch to her upper thigh. Children were present during the incident. Ferguson's 3 children were with him that morning. An emergency protective order was filed against Ferguson on January 2nd. He was arrested January 9th and charged with burglary, strangulation, assault, terroristic threatening, menacing, criminal mischief, and theft. He pleaded not guilty. During his arraignment, Ferguson's attorney Krishna Tibbs argued the victim had recanted her allegation of strangulation and didn't want to cooperate with investigators. Detective Richardson contradicted this, testifying that the alleged victim has been cooperative and already gave a statement detailing not only the strangulation to unconsciousness, but also the threatening phone call afterward. The judge set bond at $10,000 and issued a no-contact order. Ferguson posted bond and was released. Here's what gets me about this case: the image versus the reality. Ferguson's attorney requested bond be lowered to $5,000, claiming the victim agreed. The prosecutor wanted $50,000, citing domestic violence concerns. Judge Delahanty offered to recuse herself because she'd been to Ferguson's restaurant and currently watched his TV show with her children. She said in a strangulation case, she'd set bond at $10,000. Think about that. The judge knew him, liked his cooking, watched his show with her kids, and even she recognized the severity of strangulation charges enough to set bond at $10,000 despite the defense's argument. Strangulation is one of the most significant predictors of future lethal violence in domestic abuse cases. When someone puts their hands around another person's neck and applies pressure until consciousness is lost, they're demonstrating both the willingness and capability to kill. It's intimate violence. It's control. It's saying, I can end you right now, and I'm choosing not to this time. And Ferguson allegedly did this to his estranged wife while their 3 children were present, then threatened to kill himself if she told anyone, then stole her identification and financial cards to ensure she couldn't easily leave or seek help. The Food Network didn't immediately comment when WHAS 11 requested a statement. Ferguson's social media continued sharing recipes and videos on the network's platforms. Super Chef Grudge Match continued airing, and Ferguson appeared in court over Zoom for his probable cause hearing, face on screen, charged with first-degree burglary and first-degree strangulation, both felonies. The judge ultimately threw out the theft charge, but kept the strangulation and burglary charges. Ferguson was indicted by a Jefferson County grand jury in February 2024. Here's what haunts me: domestic violence doesn't care about your resume. It doesn't care that you cooked for Olympians or hosted a TV show or inspired people with your redemption story about leaving drug dealing behind for culinary school. It doesn't care that a judge watches your show with her children or that you're a staple on the Food Network. What matters is what happens behind closed doors when the cameras are off and the public image drops and someone you claim to love won't answer your calls. Ferguson allegedly chose violence, chose strangulation, chose to steal her ability to leave. And his estranged wife woke up on the floor with marks on her neck and fear in her throat, and the knowledge that the man she once trusted had shown her exactly what he was capable of. The case is still ongoing. Ferguson remains out on bond with a no-contact order. His career continues. And somewhere, his estranged wife is trying to rebuild a life while the man who allegedly strangled her appears on television, smiling, cooking, playing the role of the chef who beat the odds. Case number 4 is that of Dionys Lee Jr., 22 years old, indicted on 17 counts across 3 separate homicide cases spanning 2 years. St. Matthews Police Chief Barry Wilkerson said it best. "I think this is just an individual who has no conscience, no morals, no values. He doesn't respect life. And I think it's very fortunate we've gotten this young man off the street." 3 murders. 1 stepfather. 1 pregnant mother. 1 young man left dead on a sidewalk. All connected to Lee. July 9, 2023. Wilson Avenue in the Park Hill neighborhood. 23-year-old Moselle Isaac Johnson Jr. was found dead on the sidewalk, shot. Neighbors remembered the chaos as first responders arrived. One neighbor told reporters she went to her front door and there was a man laying on the sidewalk in the street, dead, with police everywhere. Johnson's father arrived at the scene demanding answers. "He got on one of these white shirts, man. That's my son, man." 2 years later, investigators would connect his death to Dionys Lee Jr. August 13, 2025, around 9 at night in the 4000 block of West Broadway. 28-year-old Jermia Squeaky Offutt was shot. She was a mother to 3 kids and 4 months pregnant with her 4th child. She was taken to UFL Hospital but died from her wounds. Lee was indicted on first-degree fetal homicide, murder, criminal attempt murder, tampering with physical evidence, and 10 counts of wanton endangerment. Court documents allege Lee acted with extreme disregard for human life, firing multiple rounds in populated areas. Offutt's family said she was known as Squeaky and was loved by everyone who knew her. Lee killed her and her unborn child in a hail of bullets. 3 days later, August 16, 2025, the 800 block of Markham Lane at the Jamestown Apartments in St. Matthews. Officers arrived to find 48-year-old Jeremy Thomas shot multiple times. He died at UFL Hospital from his injuries. Police found a gun on the ground with the magazine removed from the weapon. Lee was originally charged with assault domestic violence, but the charges were upgraded to murder domestic violence. Lee told detectives he'd been in an altercation with his stepfather when he got a gun and shot him multiple times. Think about that. An altercation with his stepfather, the man who presumably helped raise him, who lived with him, who was part of his family, and Lee's response was to grab a gun and empty it into him. Lee was already in custody at Louisville Metro Corrections for Thomas's murder when the Jefferson County grand jury indicted him on the other 2 homicide cases. 17 counts total. 3 murders. 1 fetal homicide. 1 criminal attempt murder. 10 counts of wanton endangerment. 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence. Penalties range from 20 years to life, or life without parole. Here's what gets me about Dionys Lee Jr. The escalation and the randomness. Johnson's murder in July 2023 was the beginning. Then nothing for 2 years. Then in August 2025, within 3 days, Lee killed Jermia Offutt and her unborn baby, then turned around and killed his own stepfather. 3 days. 2 separate murders. 1 involving a pregnant mother and 10 counts of wanton endangerment because he fired into a populated area. The other involving a domestic altercation with his stepfather that ended with multiple gunshots and a discarded weapon. Chief Wilkerson called Lee an individual with no conscience, no morals, no values, someone who doesn't respect life. That assessment came after Lee allegedly shot his stepfather multiple times during what Lee himself described as an altercation. Not self-defense. Not an accident. An altercation that Lee chose to end with gunfire. And that was after allegedly killing Offutt and her unborn child just 3 days earlier. After allegedly killing Johnson 2 years prior. The violence spans 2 years, but the brutality is consistent. Lee allegedly fired multiple rounds in populated areas, showing extreme disregard for anyone who might be nearby. He allegedly tampered with physical evidence in 2 separate cases, trying to cover his tracks. And when confronted by detectives about his stepfather's death, he admitted to shooting him multiple times after an altercation. No remorse. No justification. Just an admission. Moselle Johnson's father stood at that crime scene in July 2023 demanding to know who killed his son. Jermia Offutt's 3 children lost their mother and unborn sibling in a hail of bullets. Jeremy Thomas's family lost a 48-year-old man to his own stepson's violence. And Dionys Lee Jr. sits in Louisville Metro Corrections awaiting trial on 17 counts, facing penalties that could keep him in prison for the rest of his life. Chief Wilkerson said it's very fortunate they got this young man off the street. Fortunate for who? Not for Johnson, who's been dead since 2023. Not for Offutt and her unborn child. Not for Thomas. They didn't get fortunate. They got killed by someone who, according to police, has no conscience, no morals, no values, and no respect for life. Lee is off the street now. 3 people are still dead, and the families are left trying to understand how someone could kill 3 times in 2 years and show no remorse. Case number 5 is that of Brenda Porter, 62 years old at the time of her trial, convicted of murdering her boyfriend of 3 years, 69-year-old David Birch, in their Louisville home in January 2018. Police found Birch's body wrapped in bedding and a plastic tarp in the backyard of their Wellbrook Road home. Porter had bludgeoned him to death with an ivory statue, then grabbed a bottle of vodka and continued the assault as he lay on the floor. When he moaned and cried out her name, begging for help, she ignored him and left him to die. Then she wrapped his body, bought cleaning supplies, and tried to erase what she'd done. According to court records and police reports, Porter and Birch got into an argument just days before his body was found. Investigators say Birch told Porter to move out. That's when she attacked him, striking him repeatedly in the head with items inside the home. First the ivory statue, then the vodka bottle. Officials said Birch bled to death from multiple blunt force injuries to the head. Porter confessed to police that after the assault, she heard Birch moaning and crying her name, calling for help. She ignored his pleas. She left him on the floor to die alone while she figured out what to do next. Porter told LMPD she attempted to dispose of Birch's body by wrapping him in bed linens, comforters, and plastic tarp. She purchased cleaning products to try and clean up the crime scene. She admitted she planned to destroy evidence of the crime and get rid of the body entirely. But someone tipped off police, and officers responded to the 3000 block of Wellbrook Drive on a welfare check on January 21, 2018. That's when they found Birch in the backyard, wrapped up like garbage, left outside near Assumption High School in the Gardiner Lane neighborhood. Porter was arrested that night. At her first court appearance on January 22nd, her family, her son, sisters, and brother, all showed up to let the judge know they could look after her if she got released. The judge, Sean Delahanty, read Porter's criminal history aloud. In 1993, 2 counts of criminal possession of a forged instrument. 5 years suspended sentence. Porter was placed on house arrest with an original bond set at $250,000. Neighbors were outraged. One neighbor told reporters he didn't understand why they released her, that the neighborhood was now uptight. But Porter's family pleaded for leniency, and she went home on house arrest while awaiting trial. A day later, January 23rd, a Jefferson County grand jury indicted Porter on murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with physical evidence. Her house arrest was canceled, and she was booked at Metro Corrections on a $100,000 full cash bond. She stayed there until trial. In November 2022, a Jefferson County jury found Porter guilty on all charges: murder, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. During the penalty phase, Birch's brother Bruce testified. He said he would never forget the pain of finding out his brother was dead, of going to identify him and not being able to recognize him because of what Porter had done to his face. That's an experience I wish upon no one. If you have to go identify a loved one and your first view of them, you can't recognize them. We've been living with this, myself, my wife, David's friends, for 5 years, and we're ready for justice. Porter's family pleaded with the jury to be lenient, citing her health issues including diabetes and kidney trouble. Her son Chad Porter begged the jury, "I just want her to be able to see my kids walk down the aisle one day, hopefully graduate college one day." The jury recommended 40 years for murder and 5 years for tampering with evidence, to run concurrently. The judge agreed. Porter was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Here's what haunts me about this case: the cruelty of ignoring someone's cries for help. Porter didn't just kill Birch in a moment of rage. She beat him with an ivory statue until he collapsed. Then she grabbed a vodka bottle and kept going. And when he lay on the floor moaning and crying her name, begging for help, she walked away. She left him to bleed out alone on the floor while she figured out how to cover it up. That's not heat-of-the-moment violence. That's cold calculation. That's choosing to let someone die slowly, in pain, calling out for you, and deciding their suffering doesn't matter. Porter lived with Birch for 3 years in his home. She rented from him. They were in an intimate relationship. And when he told her to move out, she decided he didn't deserve to live. Bruce Birch said his brother was unrecognizable when he went to identify him. That's how brutal the beating was. Porter hit him so many times, so hard, that his own brother couldn't recognize his face. And then she wrapped him up, left him in the backyard, and started cleaning. Brenda Porter is serving 40 years in prison. David Birch is still dead. His brother still carries the memory of seeing him unrecognizable in the morgue. And somewhere in a Kentucky prison, Porter is alive, breathing, eating, sleeping, all things Birch doesn't get to do because she chose a statue and a vodka bottle over letting him live. That's the cost of domestic violence when it's taken to its extreme. That's what happens when anger turns into murder and murder turns into calculated disposal. Birch called out for help. Porter heard him, and she walked away. Case number 6 is that of William Mason Jr. We like to think our front doors keep the world out, but what happens when the world is already inside, sitting on your sofa, waiting for the sun to go down? We take comfort in the walls of our homes, believing that 4 layers of drywall and a deadbolt are enough to separate us from the chaos of the streets. But case number 6, the story of William Mason Jr., also known as Dollar, is a brutal reminder that the most dangerous place you can be is in a room with a man who has nothing to lose and a gun in his waistband. This wasn't a crime committed in the shadows of an alleyway. It was an execution that took place inside a small, unassuming home in Louisville's Park Duval neighborhood. Now, I want you to really picture this. It's June 2016. The humid Kentucky air is thick, and the streets are quiet. Inside a house on Lewis Coleman Jr. Drive, 4 men are gathered. There's no sign of a struggle, no broken windows, no kicked-in doors. By all accounts, it looked like a normal late-night hangout. This is the mask of sanity we talk about, the ability of a predator to sit, talk, and breathe the same air as his victims without ever letting the darkness show. William Mason Jr. wasn't a stranger to these men. He was someone they knew, someone they let into their sanctuary. He was a 31-year-old convicted felon, a man who had been in and out of the system since 2005, yet he carried himself with an ease that allowed him to blend into the furniture of their lives. But then, the atmosphere shifted. Think about the sound of a handgun being drawn in a small, enclosed room. The metallic slide, the sudden realization in the eyes of the person sitting across from you. Without warning, Mason opened fire. He didn't just kill one person. He methodically executed 44-year-old Michael Bay Sr., 37-year-old John Bailey, and 40-year-old Larry Thomas. Now let that sink in. 3 men, gone in a matter of seconds. But it's what happened next that will make your skin crawl. This is the visceral detail anchor that investigators couldn't scrub from their minds: the carpet. After the life had left those 3 men, Mason didn't just run. He stayed. He took a knife to the floor and began cutting out large sections of the household carpet. Imagine the sound of that blade dragging through heavy fabric and the weight of those men's bodies as they were rolled into the very flooring they had been standing on just minutes prior. It was a cold, clinical attempt to package human life like trash. Ask yourself, if you walked into your own living room and saw your friends dead on the floor, what would your first instinct be? For the homeowner, Everett Todd, the answer wasn't to call 911. He waited 13 hours. 13 hours while the smell of copper and stale air filled that house. He initially claimed he wasn't there, that he'd spent the night with a girlfriend, but the truth eventually bled out. He admitted that Mason was the trigger man and that another man had helped cut the carpet. This is where we hit the systemic failure pivot. William Mason Jr. was a persistent felony offender. He was a man who the state knew was dangerous. He had drug convictions, weapons charges, and a history of ignoring the law. He was on parole at the time of these murders. He shouldn't have had a gun. He shouldn't have been on the streets. Yet, the system's revolving door spun one too many times, and 3 men paid the ultimate price for that failure. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and it took the jury 11 hours of deliberation to return a verdict. In the end, Mason was sentenced to life in prison. But as the gavel came down, it didn't bring those men back from the rolls of carpet they were found in. I want to leave you with this haunting thought. When we invite someone into our homes, we aren't just opening a door. We are offering our lives up to their mercy. We trust the face, but we never truly know the heart. How many people in your life right now are sitting on your sofa, smiling at your jokes, while they harbor a darkness you can't even imagine? In Louisville, one night of hospitality turned into a permanent silence, and the echoes of those gunshots still vibrate through the floorboards of Park Duval. Case number 7 is that of Jamiko Lee Hayden, a case that serves as a grim masterclass in how a single moment of unchecked aggression can dismantle a family and expose the deep fractures in the urban legal system. We often view the streets of our neighborhoods as communal arteries, paths that lead us safely to our front doors. But on December 19, 2019, the Shawnee neighborhood of Louisville saw one of its own arteries severed. Christian Gwynn was only 19 years old, a young man described by those who knew him as the house clown, the vibrant center of gravity for his parents and siblings. He was a teenager with aspirations, walking home from a restaurant with his friends, unaware that he was being trailed by a predator in a stolen vehicle. The perpetrator, Jamiko Lee Hayden, then 22, was navigating the streets in a red Chevrolet Malibu that had been reported stolen. Hayden was not a stranger to the justice system. He was a man who had already established a pattern of high-risk criminal behavior, including prior convictions for robbery and wanton endangerment. Despite his history, he was moving through the city with a loaded firearm and a complete disregard for human life. As Christian Gwynn walked near the intersection of 43rd and Market Streets, the red Malibu slowed. The windows were lowered, and without a word of provocation or a chance for the victims to flee, Hayden opened fire. Christian was struck twice. He collapsed on the pavement just blocks from the sanctuary of his home, dying in the street only 6 days before Christmas. The visceral horror of this case is found in the sensory transition of that evening. The air should have been filled with the sounds of the holiday season, the hum of distant traffic, the occasional burst of laughter from friends walking together. Instead, the night was punctuated by the sharp, mechanical cracks of a handgun and the screech of tires as the Malibu fled the scene. For Christian's mother, Krista Gwynn, the most haunting physical detail isn't the crime scene itself, but the oppressive, heavy silence that settled over their home in the aftermath. The house clown was gone, and the noise that once defined their family life was replaced by a hollow, ringing void. I want you to visualize the empty chair at the Gwynn family table, a physical marker of a life that was discarded over a stolen car and a trigger pull. The systemic failure in this case is glaring and serves as a point of extreme moral outrage. Jamiko Lee Hayden was under the supervision of the home incarceration program at the time of the murder. Just 1 month before he killed Christian Gwynn, Hayden had intentionally cut off his GPS ankle monitor, effectively vanishing from the authorities' radar. He was a known flight risk and a repeat offender who had openly defied the court's attempt at monitoring him. The fact that he was able to remain at large, obtain a stolen vehicle, and carry a weapon for 30 days after disabling his monitor is a catastrophic lapse in institutional oversight. The red flags were not just present, they were being actively ignored or lost in the bureaucracy of the court system. It took the Louisville Metro Police Department 16 months of painstaking investigation, witness interviews, and forensic analysis to finally link Hayden to the shooting. When he was finally apprehended in April 2021, the legal battle that followed offered little in the way of traditional closure. In 2023, Hayden entered an Alford plea to second-degree manslaughter. This legal maneuver allowed him to maintain his innocence in a formal sense, while acknowledging that the evidence against him was sufficient for a conviction. He was sentenced to a mere 10 years in prison, a number that felt like a secondary assault to the Gwynn family. During the sentencing, the court had to be recessed because of the emotional volatility in the room, spurred by Hayden's visible lack of remorse and reported smirking at the victim's relatives. This case leaves behind a lingering shadow that forces us to question the value the system places on a human life. We are left with the image of a family that has transformed their grief into advocacy, working to prevent other parents from feeling the weight of that same silence. But the question remains, how many other monitored individuals are currently roaming the streets with disabled trackers and loaded guns? The tragedy of Christian Gwynn wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the predictable outcome of a system that allowed a dangerous man to simply walk away from his shadow. Now, whenever a red car idles too long at a Louisville intersection, the community is reminded that justice is often too slow, too light, and too late to save the people who matter most. Case number 8 is that of Eric Slayton, a 31-year-old man whose explosive lack of impulse control turned a routine commute into a theater of death. We often view our vehicles as protective bubbles, steel sanctuaries that move us through the city in relative isolation. We expect the rules of the road, the stop signs, the lane markers, the traffic lights, to provide a predictable structure that keeps us safe. But on January 24, 2025, in Louisville's Buccal neighborhood, that structure collapsed under the weight of a violent ego. This case serves as a terrifying reminder that the most dangerous weapon on the road isn't the 2-ton machine you're driving, but the person sitting in the driver's seat of the car next to you. The incident began with a momentary lapse in traffic etiquette. A woman was driving near the intersection of Bardstown Road and Fegenbush Lane, with 25-year-old Taylor Mudd sitting in her passenger seat. As they navigated the busy 5:30 p.m. traffic, Eric Slayton, driving a white Jeep Cherokee, allegedly ran a stop sign. To avoid a collision, the woman was forced to swerve sharply around Slayton's vehicle. In a rational world, this would have been a near miss followed by a moment of frustration. But for Slayton, being avoided was seen as an affront. He did not continue on his way. Instead, he began tailgating the woman's vehicle, stalking them through the streets of Buccal Terrace like a predator tracking prey. The escalation reached its lethal peak at a red light. As the two vehicles sat side by side, idling in the mundane silence of a traffic stop, Slayton pulled alongside the passenger side. Without a word of warning, he produced a handgun and fired multiple rounds directly into the cabin of the other car. Taylor Mudd, who was merely a passenger in a vehicle that had done nothing more than avoid a crash, was struck multiple times. The driver was also hit by a projectile in her side. Slayton then accelerated and fled the scene, leaving behind a car filled with shattered glass and the dying gasps of a young man whose life was being extinguished over a right-of-way dispute. The visceral detail that anchors this horror is the sound of the projectiles hitting the car door, a sharp, mechanical punching of metal that preceded the silence of the victims. I want you to visualize that cabin in the seconds after the shooting. The smell of gunpowder mixing with the winter air, the glow of the dashboard lights reflecting off the blood on the upholstery, and the rhythmic clicking of the turn signal that continued to blink even as Taylor Mudd's heart stopped beating. It is a skin-crawl moment to realize that a 25-year-old man died, not because of a grand conspiracy or a deep-seated vendetta, but because he was sitting in the wrong seat at a red light. The systemic failure in Slayton's case is a familiar and frustrating narrative of illicit access and evaded responsibility. When Slayton was finally apprehended in April 2025, investigators discovered that the white Jeep Cherokee he had been driving was stolen. Furthermore, the handgun used in the execution had been reported stolen out of Madison County, Indiana. Slayton was a man operating entirely outside the boundaries of the law, driving a stolen car, carrying a stolen gun, and using stolen registration tags. The fact that a known offender could move through the city in a flagged vehicle for months without detection allowed the road rage to manifest into murder. Even after the shooting, Slayton simply switched vehicles, moving into a truck registered to his girlfriend, successfully hiding in plain sight until cell phone data finally placed him at the scene of the crime. Eric Slayton now faces charges of murder, assault, receiving stolen property, and theft of motor vehicle registration. But for the family of Taylor Mudd, the legal proceedings offer little comfort against the reality of a senseless loss. This case leaves a lingering shadow over every intersection in Louisville. It forces us to look at the cars idling next to us with a new sense of trepidation. We are left to wonder, who is behind the glass? Are they a neighbor heading home to dinner? Or are they a man like Eric Slayton, carrying a stolen weapon and a hair-trigger temper, waiting for a single swerve to justify an execution?